Once hailed, now haunted. The fall of Mayor Tiffany Henyard once celebrated as a dynamic super mayor of Dalton, Illinois. Tiffany Henyard's dramatic fall from grace has sent shockwaves through the community she once inspired. Her rise was swift, a bold, unapologetic black woman who shattered political barriers and commanded attention with her confident leadership. But now, that same boldness is being recast by critics as arrogance, and her charisma is eclipsed by scandal. In recent months, Henyard has found herself engulfed in a political firestorm that has completely redefined her legacy. What began as whispers of mismanagement has morphed into a full-blown reckoning. Investigations have uncovered troubling patterns. Taxpayer money allegedly used not for schools, infrastructure, or public safety, but for personal indulgences, lavish parties, five-star hotels, and first-class flights. Henyard has insisted these expenses were tied to official business. But for many Dalton residents struggling to get by, the optics are damning. Streets remain cratered with potholes, basic services have declined, and the village's finances appear to be unraveling. Yet the scandal isn't just about money. It's about power. Henyard's leadership style has long drawn comparisons to authoritarianism. Insiders describe her administration as one run less like a government and more like a kingdom, where loyalty often trumped competence. She appointed friends and allies to critical positions, some of whom lacked even the basic qualifications. Her installation of a police chief allegedly ineligible for the role further eroded public trust. Village board meetings turned combative. Henyard routinely clashed with trustees over budget decisions. Critics argue her governance became increasingly erratic, alienating colleagues and deepening the divides within a community desperate for stability. Still, Henyard retains a fiercely loyal base. For them, she is not a villain, but a victim, targeted for being a powerful black woman who dared to lead unapologetically in a space historically dominated by men. They're trying to tear her down because they can't match her energy, one supporter declared. But even among loyalists, patience is wearing thin. Each new allegation and viral controversy makes the narrative of persecution harder to sustain. That tension reached a boiling point in Thornton Township, where Henyard also served as supervisor. In a bold power play, she attempted to bypass the traditional primary process and use a caucus system to hand-pick 2024 candidates. But in a stunning twist, the strategy backfired due to a key procedural error, disqualifying Henyard herself from a race. It was a seismic blow to her inner circle and a rallying cry for her opponents. Dalton and Thornton Township now stand at a crossroads. The town's finances are unstable, public trust is collapsing, and residents are left to wonder, was Tiffany Henyard ever the leader they believed in, or just another politician seduced by power? As federal investigations intensify and media scrutiny grows harsher, one thing is clear. Henyard's political future hangs by a thread. Whether she engineers a comeback or becomes a cautionary tale, her story has already left a permanent mark on Dalton. And for a community reeling from disappointment, redemption may no longer be enough. A night of reckoning in Thornton Township, the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium, crackled with tension. That cold January evening, hundreds of bundled-up residents packed into the space. One not this animated since its 1978 production of Asterisk, A Streetcar Named Desire. Asterisk at center stage stood Illinois State Senator Napoleon Harris, his linebacker frame towering over the podium. He presided over the caucus that would determine the future of Thornton Township politics, and perhaps in Tiffany Henyard's political career. When the results were announced, Harris securing the Democratic nomination and Henyard shockingly disqualified, the room erupted like a pressure cooker blowing its lid. Henyard supporters screamed foul. Her critics hooped, some clapping so hard their mittens flew off. One elderly man in the back spontaneously broke into the electric slide. Henyard stood frozen. 3 full seconds of silence, an eternity in political time, before her composure crumbled. "This is a setup," she bellowed, her voice ricocheting off cinder-block walls. Her designer heels clicked furiously as she stormed toward Harris, who remained calm, reiterating that the switch to a caucus was legal. But everyone in the room knew the unspoken truth. This was a calculated political takedown, executed with surgical precision. Henyard's team argued that elderly black voters had been disenfranchised by last-minute rule changes. Harris's camp countered that Henyard had long played fast and loose with election laws and was finally being held accountable. Then came the moment that would dominate headlines. Surrounded by her entourage of loyalists, Henyard whipped out her phone and began live-streaming her downfall in real time. Her acrylic nail tapped furiously on the screen. "Y'all seeing this? This how they do black women in power," she exclaimed, framing the event as yet another injustice. Outside, The parking lot descended into chaos. Supporters, some busing from Dalton, clashed with Harris loyalists. Shouts echoed, and news cameras captured every second of the chaos. A Henyard aide allegedly shoved a 72-year-old precinct captain. Another attendee called police, citing voter intimidation. Through it all, Henyard alternated between fury and desperation, her political instincts failing her at a moment when she needed them most. By the night's end, two things were clear. Harris had outmaneuvered her, and Henyard's temper had handed her enemies the perfect soundbite for the evening news. The fallout was swift and brutal. Twitter exploded with #DaughterByTiffany, trending statewide by midnight. Former allies began quietly deleting photos of her from their social media. But the most damning critiques didn't come from politicians. They came from Thornton Township residents. A single mom working 2 jobs asked why Henyard had time for press conferences but not potholes. A retired auto worker said he calculated that the money spent on Henyard's hotel stays could have repaved his entire street. As the scandals pile up and federal investigators dig deeper, Henyard's reign appears increasingly unsustainable. Whether this is the end of her political story or just an intermission remains uncertain. But in Dalton and Thornton Township, one chapter is clearly closed, leaving behind questions, chaos, and the bitter sting of betrayal. The rise and fall of Tiffany Henyard, a cautionary tale in real-time ***. Tiffany Henyard's travel expenses alone could have funded 3 new senior centers. But even in political freefall, she kept swinging, floating trial balloons about running as an independent or even switching parties. These desperate gambits only underscored how thoroughly she had been boxed out of the Democratic establishment she once ruled. What made the spectacle tragic was a ghost of what might have been. Just 5 years earlier, Henyard was hailed as one of Illinois' brightest political stars, a charismatic hometown figure who shattered ceilings as both Dalton mayor and Thornton Township supervisor. She'd run on cleaning up corruption, only to find herself accused of the very graft she once vowed to eliminate. There was the $18000 conference table, the lavish travel, the unanswered questions about missing funds, the unhinged public outbursts. All of it seemed to crystallize in her humiliating caucus defeat, a moment that laid bare the collapse of her once impenetrable image. As the clock ticked past midnight on caucus night, one image lingered. Tiffany Henyard, standing alone in a frigid parking lot, her breath forming clouds in the cold air as she stared at her reflection in a darkened car window. Perhaps for the first time, she understood that no amount of spin could undo what had been done. The system hadn't merely turned against her. The people had. And in politics, once the crowd decides the show is over, no amount of encores can bring them back. 3 days later, the Thornton Township Democratic Committee released a 27-page report outlining irregularities in Henyard's nomination petitions. The FBI confirmed it was reviewing the township's finances, and Senator Napoleon Harris, the man who had outmaneuvered her at every turn, was photographed smiling with the governor at a South Side diner. He looked every bit the heir apparent to a political machine that had just devoured its own queen. The higher Henyard climbed, the harder she fell. What began as quiet concerns over questionable spending exploded into public scandal with the revelation of a $3,000 Amazon bill, an amount that would take the average Dalton resident nearly 8 months of wages to earn. The itemized receipts painted a damning picture. 800 ergonomic office chairs, while community center furniture rotted, a $2 for a 100 espresso machine to boost staff morale, while teachers bought their own supplies, and the now infamous gold-plated Apple Pencil listed under office equipment. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Here was a mayor who had campaigned as a working-class champion, now living large on taxpayer dollars, while many of those taxpayers struggled to keep their lights on. The betrayal cut deep. Longtime supporters who once knocked on doors for her now stood outside City Hall with signs reading, "Our tax dollars paid for your gold pen." Church leaders who once blessed her campaign rallies were now praying for federal investigations. The final blow came when local reporters published side-by-side images. Henyard's lavish office makeover contrasted with photos of crumbling school buildings and pothole-riddled streets. Her carefully crafted image, as a woman of the people, lay in ruins. What remained was the harsh reality of a politician who had lost touch with the very community she was elected to serve. As pressure mounted, Henyard's political instincts failed her. A disastrous campaign event, where she fled the stage just 7 minutes in, became a metaphor for a crumbling administration. All bluster, no accountability. A defiant Facebook Live video, apparently filmed from her newly remodeled home office, only poured gasoline on the fire. They're coming after a strong black woman. she declared to a shrinking audience. But the comments section told a different story, flooded with screenshots of extravagant purchases and disbelief. Even her inner circle began to unravel. Once loyal staffers resigned in droves, many leaving behind damning statements about financial mismanagement and toxic leadership. The final humiliation came quietly. The annual Tiffany Henyard Day celebration was rebranded as Community Unity Day, a symbolic erasure that spoke volumes. Tiffany Henyard, once a rising political star, now stood alone. Her legacy, once full of promise, had curdled into a cautionary tale, a warning about the corrosive effect of unchecked power and forgotten promises. In the end, the receipts didn't just expose misused funds. They revealed a deeper truth. When leaders begin to treat public service as a vehicle for personal luxury instead of collective progress, their downfall isn't a matter of if, but when. The residents of Dalton and Thornton Township will remember this lesson long after the last Amazon package has been returned.